Is there SQL or not? SQL injection. Who does not love SQL injection? Another question from Tiberius we are going to be looking at. Let's get straight into it, right? Scrolling on LinkedIn again, as usual, Tiberius posted a question. In case you didn't see it on Twitter/X, here's a quick code review challenge. Is there SQL injection, right? Are there any security vulnerabilities in the following code? The big question is there SQL? Is there a possibility of SQL? If there is, does that actually mean there is SQL? That is the question we're going to be answering. And this is not an interview, so we actually have time to investigate. Looking at this code, there is a route called product with a parameter called foo, which is cast into an integer, which means this route will not accept any strings. It only accepts integers, right? Looking at that, we have a function called product, connects to the database, and then it uses this foo parameter without any sort of sanitization directly in the SQL query, directly into the SQL query, which means no input validation after casting it to an int. Does that mean the SQL, right? This question has 59 comments. Let's look at some of the comments. As I have understood, the foo is directly used to access the database instead of any parameterized. It will be good to parameter foo. Any others. All this person is saying is use parameterized queries, right? Tiberius says, check out line 11 though. And then Tiberius, okay, so already converting to int, making it safe. Is it really safe if you cast it into an integer? Is it? In SQL 3, we can read the tables and can see which are vulnerable. Otherwise, if possible, we can insert row or column and make it vulnerable. I don't know what this person is saying, I'm not gonna lie. But above example is good. Seems to be there is no vulnerability. Okay, they said there's no vuln, right? Just because SQLite 3 uses a flat file format doesn't mean the file is accessible via a web server. In Flask, you have to explicitly code in access to static files. Interesting. This code is supposed to be written by a backend guy. So first you need to trust database.db for sure. You can wrap connect inside a try, accept, and exit if, okay, I don't know what this person is saying. What we want to see is if people think there's a vulnerability. This person said yes, constructing a SQL query by directly concatenating user into the query string. These people are looking at line 14, right? Where this string, which used to be an int, is now used directly in the query. And they're saying there's a vulnerability. But if we look at line 11, you can't enter anything into this endpoint except a string. So is there really SQL, right? There could be, or there might not be. Tiberius again says, look at line 11. It's int foo. The parameter is only accepting integers. SQLite shouldn't be used for an e-commerce site as the performance is abysmal. It's definitely vulnerable to DOS. Also, every time you hit the endpoint, you're creating a new connection to the DB. That looks like another avenue for DOS to me, right? Yeah, people on Twitter tested me with the DB criticism too. I'd argue most sites are vulnerable to DOS in some way or another. At least you didn't say SQL. Okay, so I mean, the question generally was, is there security vulnerabilities? So it's not just SQL. This looks like it's vulnerable to DOS. And then Ivan also goes back and says, every website is vulnerable to DOS. You just have to meet your SLA, right? But yeah, seeing as another lad in the comments recommended prepare statements, I went another. Besides, after the CTF, I'm not certain there's not a way to circumvent line 11. SQLi, again, likely could drop a union after that integer and run additional commands. Nope, that's not possible. We're gonna look at that. No, looks safe here. However, always use parameterized statements. Tiberius says correct. So Tiberius says there's no SQL, it's safe, but you should always use parameterized queries. This is not an interview. We have time to investigate, so that is what we're gonna do. We're gonna open our Kali Linux so that we actually look at this. I took the code, edited a bit so that we can have a full application, SQL, and all that fun stuff, created tables, and then this is supposed to be int. This was just me testing this. So let's save this so that we actually have a whole application. And we are going to run Python app.py. So it's serving it on localhost. So if I actually click that and go to Mozilla, it's not going to find it because we are on the wrong endpoint. And if we go to product and enter a 1, we get 50 in stock. This is just the functionality I went with. It doesn't have to necessarily be this. But as you can see, this is the endpoint, and it is asking for a parameter. Let's look at our burp suite. What am I looking at, honestly? There we go. We want to send that to the repeater and follow it. Can y'all see this? Let me make this bigger. Okay, my screen's a bit bigger, but send this. It says 50 in stock. We get a 200 status code, right? If we try any sort of like SQL payloads, we get a 404 not found. I also enabled logging, so we are going to be looking at some of the things that we are trying to do, right? So this was the first one that we ran, ID equals 1, ID equals 1. Where is the single quote? I don't know if it's going to log single quotes. If it says 404 not found, does that mean it didn't actually get to the DB? I guess that's what it means. And if we try enter any sort of other characters, it still says 404 not found. So can we really, right? Can we really have some sort of SQL? I'm going to convert this to encode all characters because I know that the functionality for this thing is weird. Right? Can we really inject SQL here? It keeps saying 404 not found. So I don't know. But if we change this and instead of casting it into an int, we cast it into a string, which means now we can enter a bunch of different stuff. Does that introduce SQL, right? Since now we're accepting strings in the parameter, does that introduce SQL? And the answer is obviously yes. 1 here that ran. Let's try a different thing just to show you guys that we're actually logging this. We ran 3, and can we say or 1 equals 1? Is that actually gonna log? I don't know. That just hung. Is it because we didn't encode this? We got an internal server error. It doesn't want that sort of encoding, I guess. Let me remove this and convert all characters and then serve this. Now it looks like there might be something because we injected something and it still returned this, right? It returned 50 in stock as though we actually just ran a normal query. But this is what we ran. ID equals 3 or 1 equals 1. Let's see what it says if we put 1 equals 2. Delete this. Why is there no shortcut to URL encode all characters? It only has one. It only has a shortcut for URL encode key characters, which is Control U. Right? URL encode all characters because that's what SQLite works. So this returned a 100 in stock instead of a 50 in stock. Why is that the case? Because we said where the ID is 3 or 1 equals true. It's going to be 3, right? Because this or is not true. But as you can see, this introduces SQL. If we turn this back into an int and try running this, right? So let's go back to Burp Suite, send this. We get a 404 not found. So is there SQL just because we're not using prepared statements or parameterized queries? I don't know. I don't know. You tell me. Is there SQL because we're not using parameterized queries or prepared statements? You tell me. But in general, the advice is do use prepared statements and parameterized queries. Relying on typecasting or casting into integers and then converting to strings. It's not always the safest bet, especially when you're trying to protect against more advanced injection attacks. I'm obviously not the SQL guru, so this is not as in-depth, but is there SQL or not? I don't know, man.